What do Wagnerian operas and modern movie scores have in common? Leitmotif. In the next two videos, we'll be talking about idée fixe and leitmotif and how it can be used in everything from classical music to video games. The history of the leitmotif actually starts in France with the idée fixe. An idée fixe is a recurring theme or character trait that serves as a structural foundation of a work. The term was later used in psychology to refer to an irrational obsession that so dominates an individual's thoughts as to determine his or her actions. In music, idée fixe is attributable to Hector Berlioz, who used the term to name the recurring motif in his Symphonie fantastique. It was a programmatic work depicting the life of an artist, and the theme represented the obsession that the artist had with his beloved. Most symphonies of the time used one or two themes per movement, but Berlioz uses idée fixe in all 5 movements of the work. It was not always the main theme, but it was presented in many differing forms. The concept of idée fixe arose in many other later composers' work, such as the thematic transformations of Franz Liszt or the leitmotifs of Richard Wagner. Let's take a look at this idée fixe from Berlioz's work Symphonie fantastique. After attending the performance of Shakespeare's Hamlet on September 11, 1827, Hector Berlioz fell madly in love with one of the leads, Harriet Smithson, who played Ophelia. Berlioz sent her a number of love letters, all which went unanswered. She left Paris without meeting Berlioz. He then wrote the Symphonie fantastique as a way to express his unrequited love for Smithson. She did not attend the premiere in 1830, but did hear the work in 1832. It was then she realized Berlioz's genius and agreed to meet him. They were married on October 3, 1833. Their marriage was short-lived. After many years of increasing bitterness, they separated. Still a conservatory student when he wrote the work, Berlioz was writing in the Romantic fashion, focusing on melody, emotion, and novelty, and individualism. This Romanticism, as it was called, paralleled movements around the same time in art and literature. Symphonie fantastique was a programmatic work, and the composer provides an autobiographical program to be read before the start of the symphony. He considered it a musical drama whose words were not spoken or sung but read silently. Berlioz wanted listeners to regard the program in the same way as the spoken words of an opera, serving to introduce the musical numbers by describing the situation that evokes in the particular mood and expressive character of each. The program is a description of events after a young and passionate artist takes some opium and dreams about his beloved. The first time you hear the idée fixe in the work is the first movement when it's introduced by the orchestra by the first violin and the flute. Let's hear that now. The idée fixe is substantially changed throughout each movement, mirroring the drama depicted in the program. Even though it is changed, the listener is still able to understand the connection to the original statement of the idée fixe, and should be able to discern the changes in the situation by the changes in the theme. The most striking change the idée fixe goes through is from the 5th and final movement, where it is morphed into a witch's dance. The program for the movement, called Dream of a Witch's Sabbath, is as follows. He sees himself at the witches' sabbath, surrounded by a fearful crowd of specters, sorcerers, and monsters of every kind, united for his burial. Unearthly sounds, groans, shrieks of laughter, distant cries, to which others seem to respond. The melody of his beloved is heard, but it's lost its character of nobility and reserve. Instead, it is now an ignoble dance tune, trivial and grotesque. It is she who comes to the Sabbath. A shout of joy greets her arrival. She joins the diabolical orgy, the funeral knell, burlesque of the Dies Irae, dance of the witches, the dance and the Dies Irae combined. The program tells the listener that the pure tune of his beloved, the Idée fixe, has been changed into something grotesque and ignoble. Let's hear it now. The clarinet plays the Idée fixe, made grotesque by the grace notes and trills that obscure the pure notes of the melody. The rhythm has changed as well, to a dance figure in 6/8. This change in the Idée fixe can be seen as his beloved's depravity being revealed, as she becomes one of the whirling and dancing witches. Idée fixe as a concept did not catch on until Wagner and the Leitmotif about 20 years later. This idea of Leitmotif took off and was used by other composers such as Franz Liszt through his thematic transformations. The Leitmotif is just like an Idée fixe, a short melodic fragment that can stand in for a person, place, thing, or situation in a work of art. Wagner used hundreds of leitmotifs in his operas, especially in his cycle of 4 operas, Der Ring des Nibelungen. Wagner preferred the term Hauptmotiv, or principal motive, in which he first used in 1877. He referred to the idea of the Hauptmotiv in opera and drama as guides to feeling, describing how they could be used to inform the listener of a musical or dramatic subtext to the action on stage, in the same way as a Greek chorus did for the theater of ancient Greece. The only time he used the term leitmotif was to call it a so-called leitmotif. The term began to be used more and more by the public, especially after Hans von Voltzhogen published a Leitfaden, or guide or manual, to the Ring in 1876. In it, he claimed to have isolated and named all of the recurring motifs in the cycle, the motif of servitude, the spear, or the treaty, etc. One of the greatest uses of leitmotif in modern culture is the Imperial March by John Williams. Introduced in the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back, it is an iconic theme heard 35 times in that movie alone. John Williams describes his music as pre-language and his intentions to tap into something earlier in the cultural salts of our brains, memories of lives lived in the past. The theme is stylistically close to Holst's Mars from the Planets, down to the menacing rhythm in the strings. Let's view some of the instances of the Vader leitmotif in The Empire Strikes Back and discuss how it is used. Don't worry, we aren't going to hear all 35 instances. The first instance of the leitmotif is right after the introductory crawl, when the Star Destroyer is releasing probes. The piccolo has 2 bars of the theme, heard before we hear it in full force. The first time it is heard in its full glory is the next time we see the Imperial fleet, with Darth Vader surveying his ships. This first instance of the leitmotif is in its original form, including the introductory bars of the string rhythm before the trumpets come in with the theme. At this point, it could mean the destructive power of the Imperial fleet, but it becomes associated with Darth Vader later in the movie. As we discussed in the Intro to Semiotics videos, the trumpet is a signifier for the military. This association is played up by John Williams by using the leitmotif to accompany the vista of Imperial Star Force passing by the camera. Darth Vader is inextricably linked to his position in the Imperial fleet and his associations with the dark side that controls it. The next time the Vader leitmotif is heard is when the movie goes back to the Imperial fleet after the Resistance finds the Imperial probe droid and decides to evacuate Hoth.
What is it, General?
My lord, the fleet has moved out of Lightspeed. Comscan has detected an energy field protecting an area of the 6th planet of the Hoth system. The field is strong enough to deflect any bombardment.
The rebels are alerted to our presence. Admiral Ozzel came out of Lightspeed too close to the system.
He felt surprise was wiser.
He is as clumsy as he is stupid. General, prepare your troops for a surface attack.
Yes, my lord.
Lord Vader, the fleet has moved out of Lightspeed and we're preparing to...
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral. Captain Piet.
Yes, my lord.
Make ready to land our troops beyond their energy field and deploy the fleet so that nothing gets off the system. You are in command now, Admiral Piet.
Thank you, Lord Vader.
This second appearance starts as the first did, with a surveying sweep of Imperial craft as the theme plays loudly. The leitmotif goes on to be played in the background of the next scene, especially when Darth Vader is talking. This is when the leitmotif becomes intertwined with Darth Vader himself, instead of the power of the Imperial army. The next instance of the leitmotif we will listen to is when Darth Vader surprises Han, Leia, and Chewbacca in the Cloud City on Bespin. Let's listen to that now.
I've just made a deal that'll keep the Empire out of here forever.
We would be honored if you would join us.
I had no choice. They arrived right before you did. I'm sorry.
As you can hear, the Vader leitmotif plays very briefly in the horns and in a truncated form. Its association with Darth Vader is so powerful that you do not need to hear the rhythmic strings or even the whole line to conjure the image of Darth Vader. The most dramatic and arguably important use of the Vader leitmotif is right after the duel between Darth Vader and Luke. Luke is high above the shaft, holding on for dear life and cradling his arm that is now missing a hand. Let's hear it now.
If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No, I am your father.
No. That's not true. That's impossible.
Search your feelings. You know it to be true. You can destroy the Emperor. He has foreseen this. It is your destiny. Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
The rumble of timpani starts off this instance of the leitmotif, played by the French horns. The A section of the leitmotif is played through, under tempo, as Luke reacts emotionally to Darth Vader's confession. The leitmotif has lost the rhythmic strings and is played in the manner and tempo of a slow death march, giving weight and dread to this conversation. The second stanza of the leitmotif is taken up by the clarinets as the scene progresses. The leitmotif ends just as Luke has the idea of jumping off the tower. The last instance of the Darth Vader leitmotif in the movie is another subtle expression. Luke has been rescued by Leia and Chewbacca in the Millennium Falcon and is having a conversation with Darth Vader using the Force. Let's hear it now.
It's Vader.
Luke, it is your destiny.
As soon as Luke says the name Vader, before we even see him, the Vader leitmotif begins. It is played by the trombones for a more sinister and low character, and it is again played in the slow death march tempo. This gives the leitmotif maximum dread. The leitmotif is then taken over by the trumpets, playing in unison. Nothing other than the A section is played, but the audience, you and me, still get the point. It is a powerful use of the leitmotif during the dramatic end of the movie. Leitmotif is a great way to give your audience more information about a certain person, feeling, object, or just through the music. Depending on how each leitmotif is played in successive instances of it, we're able to glean how this person, place, or thing has changed. It gives us detailed knowledge of the plot as it goes forward through the medium of music. What other instances of leitmotif have you noticed? Any other movies you know that use it? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for joining me in this video about leitmotif. I had a lot of fun discussing it with you. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos about music and click the notification bell to get an alert every time I post. My bibliography for this video can be found on my website, DominiqueRoyam.com. It's linked in the description box below. Follow me on social media to continue the conversation. My handle is Dominique Royam everywhere. Thanks so much and see you in my next video.